Let's talk to Bill from Illinois, who has questions about definitions about atheist and agnostic. Bill, you're live on the air.
God damn it.
Hi guys, how you doing?
We're good. How are you?
Good. Yes, I'm a Christian. I have a lot of discussions with atheists regarding the terms of atheist and agnostic and where they draw the line. I know they say that atheists have a belief that they know or don't know, or agnostics know or don't know. So I'm very confused on why don't we have just a hard atheist does not believe and agnostic doesn't know.
Because
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So there's two ways to go with this. I mean, the way that you'll always be right is by asking the person you're talking to what they mean by the words that they're saying, right? If you want to go into the, I would say, proper philosophical definitions that are rooted in like the linguistic basics, you can either be a theist or an atheist. It's a dichotomy, right? A theist believes in God. An atheist does not have a belief in God. And then you can be Gnostic, which Gnosis means like no, I think in Greek. Or you can be agnostic, which means you don't know. And that has to do with certainty. So you can be a Gnostic theist, an agnostic theist, a Gnostic atheist, or an agnostic atheist. They're not the same. They're sort of two separate categories of thing. And so those are the definitions that I use, and I think that's the definition that most folks in the ACA use. Shannon, do you concur?
I differ in the definitions that I use. I tend to stick more to the definitions that are used like in philosophical texts. So I consider myself an atheist because I actively believe that there is no God. Agnostics suspend judgment, and theists believe that there is a God. Like, I don't think that it's logically coherent for there to be a God. But I can't stress enough how much I don't care. Because honest to God, like, like that's the way that I use it. Other people use it a different way. And who gives a shit? Like, honest to God, there's so many more important things to talk about than like pedantry surrounding like how people use labels. Like what MD Aware said first is absolutely the philosophy that I have is, okay, what do you mean when you call yourself an atheist? Because I'm not in the business of telling people how they use the labels that they've ascribed for themselves. That's up to them. Whatever, so long as it makes some degree of sense and they're not saying I'm an atheist and that means that I eat purple rainbows every other Wednesday. That doesn't make sense. That's not the way a word would be used, right? But there's a colloquial usage of the word atheist, which can mean everything ranging from lacks belief in a God to actively doesn't believe there is a God. Some people even suspend judgment and still use the term atheist. And I actively don't, unless they're writing a philosophical paper where they need to be like very, very specific about the terminology they're using. If you're just having a casual conversation with somebody about the way that they believe and why, the first thing you should do is just move past their label and talk about the subject matter. Like, my God, why does anybody care? That's my position.
Bill, what do you think? Why do you care?
Only problem is when I start going into debates with atheists, their belief and how they express what they believe starts to change. Once I ask them, do you know that God doesn't exist? Then sometimes they'll say, well, we're not sure. Then I say, well, then if you're not sure, how come you're not an agnostic? Because if you're not sure God exists, then it's possible God exists. And then we start getting a little bit.
That's not
why
true.
Do you care? Like, also, why do you care? Like, so you asked them a question. You said, hey, do you think that there's absolutely no way God exists? And they said, oh, I'm just not sure. And you said, aha! Instead of continuing this conversation, we're now going to enter an argument about how you use the labels that you assign to yourself, because that's apparently what's important now. Like, what does that matter?
Maybe, Bill, I think what I heard you saying is that you can only be an atheist if you're certain that there is no God. Is that what you think? Is that your opinion?
Yes, because then other than that, you'd be a agnostic, is what I'm saying. If you're
okay, but those are just labels, right? Like so you're sort of going towards Shannon's labels rather than mine, which is fine. I understand, but also, like Shannon said, who cares? I would say that most atheists would say that they're not 100% sure. Most atheists would say that they're maybe sure about certain gods that are perhaps logically inconsistent. But I don't know personally any atheists who would go as far as to say, I know for sure that there are no gods in any sense of the word, because definitions are just so fuzzy. Like, that's going to bite you in the ass.
That's fair, actually.
Yeah,
Depends on the context.
that's the problem. I have met and argued with many atheists that say 100% they know God doesn't exist. Then that's where we start differentiating between the ones that know and don't know. The ones that don't know should be labeled agnostic. And obviously, the way I debate agnostic compared to an atheist is going to be different, because then I'm going to have to figure out what they believe.
Why don't you
just ask? So, like, honestly, when I get into a debate,
solution to this problem.
When I get into a debate, usually my first question is, what do you believe and why? And they say, I believe in the Christian God or whatever. And I say, give me a definition of your God that we can work with, right? That we can like sort of understand together. And then I'll tell you whether I believe in that or not. Because if they say, I believe in God, and I believe God is this table that we're sitting at this coffee shop, then I'll say, great, I also believe in your God. It's totally vacuous unless you put something behind the definition. So just honestly, just ask them what they mean, and forget this like it almost sounds like you've got two scripts in your head, and one of them is for an agnostic and one of them is for an atheist, and you're trying to choose between which of those scripts to go on. And I would say, like, just talk to the person and have a conversation and try to genuinely understand where they're coming from and what their thoughts are, and respond to them. Like, that's the honest way to have a conversation, right?
Yeah, but sometimes they start slipping back and forth on what they believe, because once they start saying, I know 100% God doesn't exist, and then I ask them, how do you know 100% God doesn't exist? Then that's when we start slipping into, well, I'm not sure if God does exist or doesn't exist. So they start slipping back and forth to become agnostic. So I want to pinpoint them, and you're absolutely right.
So I think what you're seeing there is them going between the practicality, because in the day-to-day life, maybe they act like they're sure that no God exists, right? But if you really pin them down and say, well, okay, if I'm thinking philosophically, how can I be sure of anything? The only thing I know exists is my mind. So how could I possibly know that anything 100% doesn't exist like God, right? So, like, you have to sort of get on their level, and maybe you're also witnessing them working out this sort of thing, in real time. Not everyone comes to the table with fully formed thoughts and ideas, and my ideas change depending on the conversations I have, which is why I have these conversations. And so, like, I wouldn't see that shifting as an evasion tactic. I would try to understand why they're actually doing it and address it. And I think you're doing the right thing from a debating perspective, in chasing down and trying to pin them down on what they mean, but try to understand what they mean in a charitable rather than a antagonistic way.
Nothing will get somebody to not want to talk to you quicker than telling them that the label that they use for themselves, that you know who they are better than them, and that based on the honest conversation that you're attempting to have with them, you've now decided that how they describe themselves, you get to determine that because of pedantry. That's a sure way to get somebody to see your side 100% of the time. Like,
thank you, guys. Appreciate the input.
No problem.
Thanks, Bill.